Hey guys, thanks for joining in. I took a 1 hour drive today through Austin, Texas, and picked random locations and noted wherever I saw mistakes. So right here, this was a phantom braking. It seems like hard shadows, especially when there aren't any other cars around, seems to cause it. So overall, I spent an hour driving around. Uh, I have to say this is a better version than I've had before. This was another phantom braking. Once again, no other cars around, hard shadows. It's definitely worse in this version than prior versions. Uh, it's not, I think, a critical disengagement, but it's certainly annoying. It's embarrassing and uncomfortable. Here I am picking another just random location. I'm just like, I don't know, somewhere on the map. And then I'm like, let's go. And I'm like, let's go, come on. But my overall feeling, when I first got this version, I tried some very difficult sections that I knew 12.3.6 could not handle. So I was eager to try this new version, and it did do better. But it also has these kind of odd artifacts, and actually, we're going to see one of them right here coming up. So this is a pretty hard left. Like, I would never choose to do this left as a human. The visibility on the right is really bad. All these cars backed up with the light. I mean, you can't see cars coming up. And it's not really trying until it gets an opportunity and the cars leave. And then it goes for it. But look at this. Did you see that weird, like, angled... What is this path? It's not a path that, you know... I think it's just like a bug. I mean, I don't feel like this is a problem with inference speed or anything like that. It's just there's some bugs that have been rushing to get all the stuff out, and there's some weird stuff that happens. I think at this point we're in East Austin, and what are we coming up to here? I think we're heading back over towards downtown. And oh yeah, this part I mentioned because the left blinker turned on randomly, and it's the only time I'd seen that. I had heard reports about it. Also, right here, we get a really smooth change into the center lane to avoid traffic. That's something I've noticed this version does really well, is confidently changes lanes to avoid traffic, and it's definitely more capable is what you get out of it. I think down here we're probably heading down Airport, heading over to the east side, and yeah, this is actually a neighborhood I used to live in back in the day. The other thing I remember this part of the drive reminding me of is there are some other weird artifacts, like just driving at 30 miles an hour doesn't feel entirely smooth. It feels like it's constantly adjusting the speed back and forth. I don't know, maybe you consider it a juddering, throbbing, pulsing, something like that. And it's one of the little weird artifacts of this version. Something I pointed out in another video is that I think a lot of this comes down to them trying to run a really large model on old hardware. This is hardware 3. And if you look at this, I pointed this out because it just didn't get around this bus. And it didn't even seem to try. And there was certainly room as a human. And you can even see on the map there does seem to be, but for whatever reason it doesn't. So not a big deal. But if you look at the blue line and how often it updates, on hardware 3 in this version, it only updates 2 to 3 times a second, which means that it's like it's seeing the world at 3 frames a second, and the world's going to change quite a lot. And I think that's why you get sometimes these kind of like back and forth blue lines. This ended up being a slightly tricky intersection. The visibility on the right was bad, and it halfway committed and then realized there was a car coming and stopped. And this is actually something I think a human would do. You don't see a car coming, you see the car coming, and you stop, and that's just something that people do. So I would actually give that a pass and actually a pretty good result. I remember that right was a little bit wide, but it was trying to avoid a very blind area. Now this one was a little bit interesting. It took a little longer on this right than it really needed to. It was very easy to go, but then I found a very easier, bigger window. But then look at this. It goes right, right, and then decides, let's go left, and then right. It's this is the juddering, the parking lot intersection thing. They actually just talked about this. There's a new version out, of course, 12.5.5. This is for the Cybertruck and full highway stack, and it is supposed to address this. Hopefully, it also addresses this. This is the highway, and decided to go in the left lane, and then immediately decided to go in the right lane. It's like, why? What? These are not critical disengagements. If you're in the back seat on your phone, you wouldn't notice any of these things, and it'd be fine. But when you're, evaluating how good the software updates, you pay attention to everything, and that's one of the things I noticed. This ended up being a slightly trickier part of my drive. This is South Austin now, a neighborhood I used to live in, and we did have our first real critical disengagement here. If you see, we make a right. It thinks we can go through this condo, but actually it can't because there's a chain there. And this has been a long issue for full self-driving. It just cannot see very small fences, very small post that blocks a road or a chain and things like that. This was interesting. I've never seen it actually make a turn as steep as this in a dead end. So that was an impressive and a delightful little addition. Now maybe 3.6 could do that. I never tested it, but it certainly can make steeper turns than before. Like I've said, more capable with some quirks. So this turn was not ideal. It goes in, blue line disappears randomly, which is odd. But the car that just passed me right there probably thought I shouldn't have come in, to be honest. Not terrible. It's, typical to a lot of things people do. But it's inconsistent because sometimes it's so careful. And here it was not that careful. But here was a perfectly good U-turn. I don't think I've ever seen 12.3.6 do a U-turn. I'm sure maybe it could. I don't really know. But unfortunately now we are getting to the real, I think, disengagement of this trip. So the light turns yellow, and it cannot decide whether or not it should go or not. So I'm going to play this back slowly. It's following traffic. It has a follow car. The light turns yellow. It decides it can't go. It decides it has to go. It decides it can't go. It decides it has to go. And then I just step on the gas to go through it. And I don't really know where it would have landed. I assume it just kind of would have just stuck out there with being halfway in the intersection. I don't really know. And it was disappointing. But considering I've been driving around for an hour, and outside of that chain link fence, there's really nothing I had to do, and I never touched the steering wheel. The only things I touched the steering wheel for were to report phantom braking or the turn signal on. Things that aren't terrible, but of course not ideal. So we're kind of getting close to the end here. The one last thing I wanted to show, which was actually something I was hoping would get fixed, but is not. So this is the exit I would take to go to my house. And it's coming up, and it decides I'm going to get into this left lane, even though I need to be in the right lane. It does this every single time. Hopefully with the full highway to highway stack, hopefully this is gone. It's some very peculiar, weird thing with this intersection. And then this was a weird one too. It pulls in halfway and then just stops. And it thinks there's a right on red maybe. I'm not sure why it did this, but I ended up putting my foot on the gas to go. Once again, not dangerous, but less than ideal. You'd rather it, just go and understand things. So, overall, I do have to say that this new version is a step change. It gets me very excited for the future. And the hands-free is amazing. The capabilities are great. But I think this release came off a little hot, and there's a little rough edges, and I'm looking forward to them smoothing it out, and it looks like they're moving very quickly. So that's my 1 hour driving around random spots in Austin review and comments. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.